When I hear the word Braun mentioned, my mind immediately goes to shavers and devices for various forms of hair removal and grooming. Indeed, if you visit the Braun website, from the UK at least, that is all you will find. Now, I did know that they make other household appliances. There is an entirely separate website advertising their toasters, irons, kettles and so on. What I definitely did not know before getting into the hobby was that they also make wristwatches and clocks, and there is a third website out there which advertises those. Being the impulsive and inquisitive soul that I am, when I discovered this, I had to get myself one. I looked through their collection and picked out a simple piece to see what they're all about. So join me, if you will, for a discussion of the brand, their history, models and design philosophy, as well as a review of the BN0021 that I picked up. As part of that review, I'll be deciding whether or not to keep the piece as part of my permanent collection or selling it on to a new home. With all that said, let's get into the video. As a brand, Braun was originally founded just after World War I in 1921 in Frankfurt by a mechanical engineer by the name of Max Braun. In its inception, the company produced radio components, eventually swapping at the end of the decade to producing their own radio sets. In the 1930s, they branched out further into record players, but it wasn't until the 1950s, post-World War II, that they moved into producing home appliances and personal grooming products. The ownership of the company has shifted a couple of times, being bought out by Gillette in the 1960s and now owned by Procter & Gamble since the early 2000s when Gillette themselves were bought out. The part that we're really interested in centres around the story of a couple of men, the most important being Dieter Rams. He was initially hired in 1955 off the back of his excellent interior design drawings. 6 years later, as a result of his successes designing products like the SK4, he was promoted to design director for the entire company. He stayed in that role until he retired in 1995. The head of Braun in 1971 was Ralph William Braun. He was travelling for business and found himself talking to the director of a company who specialised in clock movements. This wasn't a branch of the business at the time, so after striking up a partnership as a result of that chance meeting, Braun began to produce clocks. It was during this time that Dieter Rams began working with his protege Dietrich Lubs. Together, they are responsible for a lot of Braun's most iconic clock and watch designs. On the subject of watches, the first release by the brand came out in 1977. The DW20 is very much a product of its age, and yet you can still recognise some of the same design DNA even in their modern pieces. It's a digital model. Its more traditional circular design is in stark contrast with its square digital display. In a way, it's a bit of a design forerunner to the Tissot PRX digital models, and in the same way, it's a bit of a Marmite piece. But it's significant regardless of how you feel about its design. A year later came the DW30, and despite only being available to buy alongside their appliances, not really where you'd think to look for a wristwatch, they both sold in decent numbers. Enough for Braun to want to keep the watchmaking enterprise going. Arguably, the two most famous and recognisable pieces from the brand are the AW10 and AW50. These were designed as a pushback against the torrent of affordable but equally disposable quartz watches coming out of the Far East. It's from these models that some other famous design cues can be traced. The yellow second hand, already a trait from the clocks, and the red arrow highlighting the date window. It's worth noting that re-releases of these watches, almost exactly to their original spec, are still available to this day. After Rams retired in 1995, Lubs took over the design helm. But during this time, the production of wristwatches started to slow. When Procter & Gamble bought out Gillette, Braun stopped making their watches entirely. The rights to production of Braun watches was sold to a fashion watch brand known as Xeon, and Ventura were also involved in their production. It's a bit of a black hole for information on the models produced during this time, if I'm honest. The more modern Braun watches are still made by Xeon but under license and indeed design direction from Procter & Gamble. The BN0021, our star of the show, is the simplest and most affordable watch that Braun currently produce. It's a basic no-frills three-handed quartz piece powered by a Swiss Ronda 515 movement. It was part of the first wave of watches that Braun reintroduced in the early 2010s and still embodies the minimalist design style first established by Braun's initial foray into the watch market. While the model is listed on Braun's website at over $100, I was able to pick mine up on a sale on Amazon earlier in the year for just north of $40. So that price point is pretty reasonable in the context of this being from a Western brand. You could definitely get better specifications from a Far Eastern model, but that isn't really the point. If you buy one of these, it's definitely for the aesthetics. Having mentioned the specifications there, I think this is as good a time as any to talk through them. This is a 38mm piece which measures in at only 8.7mm thick. For the purposes of measurement, you can consider this to have no lugs, as the strap is actually fixed to the case beneath it. You might think that this arrangement would make the watch sit awkwardly on wrist, but the case back is also elevated so it actually sits quite flush. The lack of lugs gives the piece a very clean, futuristic look that puts me in mind of the Sega design Blue Planet, a watch that is obviously newer than the Braun, but one that I am more familiar with, hence the reference. The BN0021 has 50 meters of water resistance, stainless steel construction and mineral crystal, so as I was saying, it's not exactly a spec monster. It does come with a 2-year warranty though, that I'd wager would be easier to make use of if needed than with many Far Eastern brands that do offer better specifications at this price point. Some of those companies don't even have their own website, so the idea that the often unsigned warranty card you get from them is worth anything is frankly laughable. The on-wrist experience is a little different from a standard design. The 22mm wide strap feels too big for me when I'm putting it on, but once there, the sizing makes sense to give visual balance to the white space on the watch dial. I also found myself wearing the watch a size tighter on the strap than feels natural to me, as otherwise it does sit up a little proud and is prone to slipping around. It's not uncomfortable, and I feel like with any strap, it just needs some time to wear in properly. But it's worth mentioning as it's different from other models I've experienced. To my eye, as far as use case scenarios goes, this feels like it fits best with formal or smart casual wear. It's certainly not built to be rugged or durable, and the lack of loom on the hands makes it a little impractical for streetwear for a night out, for example. It's very thin and so fits under a cuff, and I feel like really that's where it's going to be most at home. When it comes to the question of whether or not the BN0021 is a keeper in my collection or not, if I'm honest, I feel compelled to keep it. Now, I will be truthful about why, and really it isn't actually anything to do with the relative merits of the watch itself. I feel it's a bit of a personal dereliction that this is actually the first watch of German origin that I've owned. I've long been a fan of the movements that Nomos make. A.Lange and Sona are my absolute grail brand, and I can see the appeal of Pauler and Bauhaus style pieces, especially smaller variants that I might be able to personally get away with size-wise. I want to make it a future aim of the channel to invest more time and money into German watches, and I definitely want a piece with the Made in Germany mark in my collection. So I'm going to keep the BN0021 as a placeholder for a future purchase and to act as a reminder to stay true to my word. That's not meant to be a negative commentary on the piece though, far from it. I think it's a perfectly competent and honest piece of design, reliable, stylish, and if bought during a sale, affordable too. I grew really fond of the minimalist aesthetic while wearing it. It's just that if you really pushed me on it, it's not the watch I want to have in my collection to represent German horology. I'm not sure whether there is a premium equivalent from Braun yet, but that's certainly something I would consider as a result of owning this. Having said that, I'd love to open the floor to you for your thoughts on the BN0021 and Braun as a brand. Experiences, advice, or general discussion is all welcome in the comments section below. As ever, thank you for your time. If you've enjoyed what you've seen or found it informative, consider dropping the video a like and subscribing for more content like this in future.